I remember reading a meme today that said, I'm not a night owl, nor am I an early bird. I'm just a pigeon that's constantly tired and withering away. And I think as you get to your 40s, you sort of start to feel like that. But definitely once you have children of your own, you definitely feel like that as well. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy. طيب. So we're starting with chapter number 2 today, that is called Reclaiming Deep Listening today. And I want to start off with this chapter heading itself, Reclaiming Deep Listening today. Who is he addressing? So the author over here, Sheikh Mikhail Ahmed Smith, he's addressing the believers, he's addressing Muslims, that Muslims need to reclaim deep listening today. That meaning it is imperative for us to claim this as something virtuous for ourselves. Meaning it's in our tradition, but we've lost it. Now we need to reclaim it as our own again. And this is what this chapter is dedicated to. So he speaks about understanding the centrality of listening in Islam and how it stems from who we are as human beings. So he starts off by talking about who is insan. Where does the word insan actually come from? Oftentimes we're told that the word insan comes from nasiya, meaning someone that forgets. But the word insan, when you actually study it in Arabic, it actually means someone that is social, someone that requires social interaction. And he goes on to further explain this, that even as you look at Darwin's theory of evolution explained in Arabic, how did they translate Homo sapiens? For the Arabic speakers in the room, how is Homo sapien translated into Arabic? Does anyone know? I would be very surprised if you know this. Yes. Al-Haywan al-Natiq, the animal that speaks. So Homo sapien, this complex word, Latin, now used in English, translated into Arabic as is the animal that has the ability to speak and to articulate itself. So once you understand the origins of human being, you start to understand that social interaction is very, very important to human beings, and it is the very essence of who we are. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us to be with people. And subhanAllah, I want us to understand this so deeply. Adam alayhi salam, before he came to earth, where was he? He was in Jannah. Not only in Jannah, but in the highest levels of Jannah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him everything. Everything that he could imagine, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given to him. But what did he desire? He still wanted companionship. Jannah was not enough. He needed to experience someone with it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted him his wish and granted him Hawa to be with him in Jannah. And that shows us, that story is not enough to show us how dependent we are on interaction. Nothing will. And subhanAllah, I want to go back to this dichotomy that we keep creating, that if we have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we don't need anyone else. Right? We explored that last week. That last week if someone comes, asking you for advice, it is not appropriate that you say, go and speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with and of itself. It has to be a part of a greater response that you give. Similarly over here, someone should not think that my iman is weak because I need to socialize. Someone should not think my iman is weak because I need to get married. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made these halal means knowing our dependency for these things and encouraging us to fulfill it. So if you feel a lack of fulfillment because you're not socializing, if you feel a lack of fulfillment because you are not married, this is absolutely normal, and this is you embracing who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created you to be. Now he goes on to further talk about the importance of social interaction and how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam warns us against isolation. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gives the example of shaitan as a wolf. And he goes on to say, إِنَّ الذِّئْبَ تَأْكُلُ مِنَ الْقَاسِيَةِ, that the wolf will devour, like not just eat, will devour, will annihilate the sheep that strays from the flock. So if there's a sheep that strays from the larger flock, the wolf will absolutely devour and annihilate this sheep. So what that teaches us is that there is this concept of jama'ah that we are meant to be a part of. A greater gathering, a greater congregation, a greater party that we affiliate with. And that party is meant to have characteristics. It is not, the time to discuss that, but finding people that are like-minded, that love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that prioritize the deen, That is what you are meant to be looking for, and that is who you are meant to surround yourself with. And that is why, if you look at this concept, remember last week we were talking about life is only understood backwards, but it needs to be lived forwards. So why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell us conversations of the hereafter? To make sure that we're not going to do things that we regret. To make sure that we're not going to do things that we regret. What are one of the things that people will complain about on the Day of Judgment? One of the things that people will complain about, Ya waylata laytani lam attakhidh fulanan khalila. That woe to me, only if I hadn't taken so-and-so as a friend. Why? Because they are the ones that influenced me and eventually led me astray. So this conversation is preserved for us so that we understand the impact of our social interactions. So we understand the impact of our social interactions. Now he goes on to explain the differences between animals and human beings. And this is the first question I want to pose to you. What are the significant differences between animals and human beings? So I want you to think about that. Go ahead. Yeah.
Human beings, they have they can think, they have a better brain.
They have a better brain. I like that answer. Okay. What else? Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, what was the first word? So animals only have instincts, and then humans have the ability to discern. Okay, excellent. Sisters, difference between animals and humans. Major differences. Ilm, meaning? An example.
And he memorized them all, and then he would say what their names was, right? And so, and memorization, maybe that's part of the human being, and it's not in an animal.
Okay, excellent. So knowledge and the ability to memorize. I'm going to pick up on that point in a little bit. What else, sisters? What are major differences between animals and human beings? The ability to speak. They have their languages. So I was thinking about parrots, right? Certain type of parrots, they can repeat what they hear, and they're able to memorize some of those statements, and it just becomes repetitive. Excellent. They're unable to express their own feelings. They're unable to have deep conversations, right? So they're unable to have those things. Go ahead, last one.
Humans, they build up towards something, while animals don't have an end goal.
Excellent. I like that. So human beings have this need to build and to develop, whereas animals, they just live within their confines, no ambition, no goal, not striving towards anything. So Sheikh Mikhail, he goes on to explain a few very, very important points. That if you look at the difference in the animal and the human being, animal brains are not as small. Human brains are actually much larger compared to their size, right? Compared to their size. Why does that actually happen? Why are human brains bigger than animal brains? And then even amongst the animals themselves, why do some animals have bigger brains and some animals have smaller brains? His theory over here, and he uses science to prove it, is that the bigger the brain, the more relationships they are able to develop and need to take care of. The fewer relationships you need to take care of and develop, the smaller your brain will be. So meaning the more relationships you have, the more your brain develops as a result of communication, as a result of understanding other people's needs, as a result of empathy, mercy, and compassion, your brain starts to develop. Then he mentions on how primates are animals that are closest to human beings. Primates are animals that are closest to human beings. So you can think of different types of monkeys and apes that exhibit human-like behavior. They are able to create stable social circles, which a lot of other animals are not able to do. So you're able to identify the mother and the child and what that relationship actually looks like. And you're able to see activities that they do together. And you're able to see vividly the instinct in the mother to protect the child. So he goes on to say that in these primates, how do they develop their relationship? And he talks about social grooming. So if you've ever, gone onto YouTube and you're randomly going through videos, you'll come across, gorillas at a zoo. And you'll have the mother that's sitting with her child, and she's like, taking the lice out of the child's hair and rubbing her hand through the child's hair. Why is she doing that? What is the purpose behind it? So you may think it's just grooming, right? The mother wants to make sure that the child is clean. But it's much, much deeper than that. And he goes on to explain that one of the reasons behind it is emotional, and the other one is cognitive. So one deals with the emotions, and one deals with the cognition, meaning the development of the mind. So with regards to the emotional, this is how the mother shows love and affection, and to show that she cares and that she loves the child. So she does this activity. And what's really fascinating as well is that when animals have thick hair and thick fur, the sun cannot penetrate the skin. And thus the vitamin D that it needs doesn't reach it. So one of the things that social grooming creates is this very fact, is that it allows for the sun to penetrate to the skin. So when you see social grooming, it's not just between the mother and the child, but you'll see even, tribesmen, if we can call it that, amongst the animals that will come and separate the skin so that the sun can penetrate and reach the skin and it can get the vitamin D that it needs. Now, with regards to the cognition or the cognitive development, it's also to show security, meaning that the individual that is doing this for you will also be there to protect you and will also be there to provide for you. And they also learn to develop, and this is going to be, the developing distinction between human beings and animals, is that animals, for the most part, learn to live for themselves. At the most, they'll learn to live for their children, provide for their children, protect their children. And then the more advanced the animal gets, it also learns to understand the need for protecting its group. The need for protecting its group. Whereas human beings, when we develop our groups, one of the things that will differentiate us from those very animals is that this concept of good human beings, they will prioritize the needs of the group over their own, or at the very least they should. Whereas animals will not be able to do that. So now, when you understand these distinguishing factors, we also learn something called mentalizing. And this is going to be the main one that we're going to focus on today. Mentalizing means that you are understand the thoughts of others. You're able to understand the thoughts of others. So in the previous series, when we spoke about emotional intelligence, we spoke a lot about empathy, right? Trying to understand the emotions of others, putting yourself in their place so you can understand their emotional state. When we speak about mentalizing, it's not about the emotion anymore, it's about the thought behind it. طيب. So we're speaking about mentalizing, being able to understand another individual's thoughts. And this is the ability to understand that when someone says something, sometimes there's more to what they are saying than the words that they're using. Sometimes there's more to the words that they're saying than the words that they are using. I'll give you an example today. So today I was at home after Salat al-Maghrib. I was sitting on my table preparing the halaqah, and my wife was upstairs, and she calls out to my daughter, Aisha. She says, Ishi, I'm about to fold the laundry, in that tone. Now, for someone that does not understand what is happening, you would wonder, why would the mother tell the daughter, I'm about to fold the laundry? So someone wants to analyze this a bit deeper and assume the best of the mother and the daughter. You would think, you know what? The mother wants to teach the daughter how to fold the laundry. That's what she wants to do. MashaAllah, great mother. Me, the husband, who's lived with them all of my life, I understood, Aisha, come upstairs, because while we're folding the laundry, we can watch terrible TV. Terrible not as in haram, but such bad dialogue, such bad stories, such predictable, endings to what they watch. And that is how she conveyed to her that, you know what, I don't want to be alone while I'm folding the laundry. Come watch this show with me and help me fold laundry. That is mentalizing. Being able to understand the meaning of the words beyond what is actually articulated. And the deeper the relationship, the deeper the ability to process, the more you are able to communicate with the words that aren't said than the words that are said. Right? There's a saying in Arabic, الذكي تكفيها الإشارة, that the intelligent person is sufficed even by a gesture. They will understand what you are trying to say and what to articulate. And this will be a fundamental distinguishing factor between humans and animals. That yes, animals do have communication amongst themselves. Plants do have communication amongst themselves. But human beings have the ability to interpret language beyond what is said. Whereas animals will not have that. Animals will not have that. Now, why is this something that we need to focus on? Right? And I want to read out a couple of lines over here, which is in relation to the importance of what they call the false belief test. The false belief test. And the false belief test is basically helping children understand that someone may believe something that is contrary to reality. Someone may believe something that is contrary to reality. So I'll give you an example over here. You have two young girls, Fatima and Khadija. They're sisters. So Fatima is cleaning up her room, and when she's cleaning up her room, she puts the ball inside of the cupboard. She's the younger daughter, she wants to help clean up, so she takes the ball, she puts it inside the cupboard. So Khadija, the older sister now, she comes into the room and she sees that the ball is inside the cupboard, but she knows it doesn't belong inside the cupboard, it should actually be inside the toy box. So she takes the ball and she puts it inside the toy box now. So now, if you were to ask Fatima, where is the ball? What is Fatima going to respond? She's going to say it's in the cupboard because that's where she put it. But in reality, where actually is the ball? It's in the toy chest. It's in the toy box where the toys are meant to go. So now, as a child learns to understand that sometimes people will believe certain things that are contrary to reality, and that's okay. That doesn't make it wrong. It just means that this is where they are with regards to their belief. And from our perspective, as we grow older, had we had more knowledge, we should then believe that the ball is inside the toy chest. It is inside the toy box. And it is no longer appropriate to believe that the ball is inside the cupboard anymore, right? Because knowledge is meant to be embraced, knowledge is meant to be accepted. But as we get older, do all people accept reality and truth? And the answer is no. SubhanAllah, if you look at the situation in Palestine and Gaza right now, this is a clear example of it. That the truth is manifest, that you have a group that is oppressing and a group that is the victims. You have a group that is mass killing and you have a group that is being killed. Yet it is the group that is being killed and is the victim that is being portrayed as the aggressor. Now the facts are there, they speak for themselves, yet not everyone will believe, not everyone will accept. So as children, we're meant to be able to learn as to why that actually is. But as you grow older, not accepting reality and truth comes from a place of malice, comes from a place of evil intent. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us as human beings that are meant to accept the truth when we see it. That we are meant to accept the truth when we see it. So now, deep listening means that a person moves beyond the spoken words to focus on what a person feels and believes. And that's why we're speaking about this, right? So when we focus on deep listening, it's not just about the words that they're using. You have to move beyond that. You have to focus on what is this person feeling and what does this person actually believe. With regards to feelings, we spoke about emotional intelligence, but here we want to speak about what they actually believe. And based upon what people believe, it will manifest itself in terms of action. It will manifest itself in terms of action. And this shows you the power of aqidah. It shows you the power of belief. There's an example, Allahu Alam how true it is or when it happened. It happened at some point, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best when. And that is, an individual was working at a meat plant. And at this meat plant, he went in to the freezer to empty it out. And as they went into the freezer, they got locked inside the freezer. And after 4 hours, you actually see this individual, he has died of like hypothermia. Please excuse me for a second. Sorry about that. This person has died of hypothermia. Eventually they find him, the medics come, and what do they see? The freezer wasn't even turned on. It was room temperature. This person convinced themselves that the freezer was on at full blast and eventually showed the symptoms of someone that is dying of hypothermia based upon the belief systems that they have. So this shows us the value of one's aqidah, the value of what you believe. And what you believe will always manifest itself into your psyche and into the actions that you have. So sometimes people will say something, but they don't actually believe it. And the individual that's present in front of them, that if they're actually deeply listening to them, should be able to discern between what the words are saying and what the actions are displaying and what they actually believe. So now, let us further expand upon the ability to articulate. Who here has memorized Surah Al-Rahman? Who has memorized Surah Al-Rahman? Let's find some of the younger brothers. Our young brother right over here, in the black jacket. Can you recite the first 4 ayahs for me? Jazakallah khairan. Thank you so much. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and make you from the people of the Quran and make the Quran a proof for you and not a proof against you. Allahumma ameen. So now we look at these 4 verses. Ar-Rahman, the source of all mercy. Allama al-Quran, he taught the Quran. Khalaq al-insan, he created mankind. Allamahu al-bayan, and taught him the ability to express himself. So if you look at the structure of this surah, the structure of this surah is about the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to His creation. And this is repeated time and time again, right? فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ, that which of the blessings of your Lord will you deny? So it's about being cognizant of those blessings and awakening yourself to those blessings. Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you those blessings right in front of you. From them is Ar-Rahman, that your Lord is the source of all mercy, is the biggest blessing within of itself. That had you had a Lord that was vindictive and vengeful, we would have all been destroyed. But our Lord is the source of all mercy. And then He taught us the Quran. A greater blessing than being created, subhanallah. So this shows us that if you want to recognize blessings, recognize the blessing of the Quran. Just like you would cherish and value the most important things that you have, if you truly believe this, it will be indicated in how you interact with the Quran. If you truly value it and cherish it. Because we all know with the valuable things that we cherish, we always keep them close to us. We're very protective over them. We don't want them to get spoiled. We don't want them to get ruined. It's not right if we spend a long time away from the things that we love and we cherish. But do we treat the Quran in a similar manner? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed everything that we need inside of this Quran. Then He goes on to say, خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانِ. So now, one of the, let's pick on some teenagers over here. When teenagers are going through a difficult moment in their lives, what is something terrible that they say? They say, I didn't choose to be created. I had no say in being created. Yet if you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you that from His blessings is that He created you. Now, why is life a blessing? One may, it's a fair question to ask. Why is life a blessing? Because through this life, you have the ability and opportunity to get to Jannah. And that is the greatest thing you will ever experience in your life. The greatest thing ever. And if you did not exist, you wouldn't have the opportunity to get there. And part of the journey to getting to Jannah is going through times that are difficult. There's no individual that got to Jannah except that they went through difficult times. In fact, the core of Allah's love is that difficulties are sent your way. Right? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves the people, He sends them trials. He tests them. And the most beloved of people to Allah are the prophets and those that follow their way. And they are the most tested of people. They are the most tested of people. So yes, you didn't have the say in being created, but this was the gift that was given to you without asking, like many of the other gifts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us. And then what does He go on to say? That after He created us, عَلَّمَهُ الْبَيَانِ, He gave you the ability and taught you the ability to articulate and express yourself. So now where is the fine line? Where is the fine line? Are human beings meant to express anything and everything to anyone and everyone? Or are human beings meant to be silent all the time? And the answer is always a balance in the middle. That you are meant to express yourself and to articulate yourself, but at its proper place and its proper time, and to the right people. And to the right people. And this is what the blessing of bayan is already about. So that you're able to discern what to say, how to say it, and who to say it to. So when you understand that bayan is our ability to express our feelings, that differentiates us from animals, but it also differentiates us from babies. That subhanAllah, if you look at babies, they are born and they're unable to speak. They're unable to articulate themselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala naturally instilled inside of them the ability to cry. And subhanAllah, you may think that crying is a curse. Particularly for parents, your child wakes up at 2 o'clock in the morning and it's crying. And you're wondering, why won't it stop crying? But how about if we reframe that crying? And we say that this child is trying to tell me something that will save this child's life. Imagine if you framed crying like that. Would you get angry again at a crying child? Only if you are void of compassion and mercy. Because you do not care about this child's well-being and you do not care about this child's survival. So you frame it like that, and you now understand that this is the only way that the child knows how to express itself. And what's really fascinating is that if you look at child psychology, children actually get very, very frustrated when they want to articulate how they feel and want to articulate themselves, but they don't know how. And parents are like, tell me what you're feeling, express yourself better. You're just putting more pressure on the child to express themselves in something that they can't do. So what are we meant to do in such situations? Children learn to express themselves through seeing how their parents and their surroundings respond to similar environments. So if a child is in a frustrating situation, it learns behavior from its parents. How did the parent respond to a similar situation? And this goes back to the example we spoke about last week. Where do children learn how to swear? Oftentimes it's not from their friends and their colleagues. It's from their parents at home. That their parents respond to anger and frustration in such a way, so the child learns, when I'm angry and frustrated, this is what I meant to say. So now with such knowledge and such information, imagine that if you learned, or rather if you express that when I'm angry, I say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. So that the child, when the child gets angry now, they express themselves by saying, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. And this is how you learn the knowledge that we are learning today to impact the relationships that you have with your children, but with all of your family members, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Meaningful relationships require cognitive investment. And actually, I forgot something I wanted to share. So going back just one section, the frustration comes because Allah has placed within us the desire to articulate what we experience within ourselves and to share that inner world with other people. So the inability to articulate what you're feeling and what you're going through to people is not just frustrating for children. it actually becomes frustrating for adults as well. When adults are unable to express how they feel, and even worse, when they have no one to express it to. So you're constantly just internalizing those feelings yourselves. So now, moving on to meaningful relationships require cognitive investment. So complex social systems are those in which individuals frequently interact in many different contexts with a certain number of individuals. So human beings, we have complex social systems. So you will have one individual that has many, many functions. You are a husband, you are a son, you are a friend, you are an employee, and you serve many, many functions. The more functions you serve, the more your brain develops. The more you interact with people as a result of these functions, the more your brain will develop even further, the more feelings you will feel, and the more you will feel a sense to articulate yourself. The more you will feel your need to articulate yourself. So now, is communication a form of weakness, or is communication a form of strength? Oftentimes we may think that if we overly communicate, this is a form of weakness. But in reality, communication is a form of strength. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught us how to express ourselves. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala communicates what He wants to us through the Quran. So communication is a form of strength and not a form of weakness. We're not meant to live in isolation, in silence. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not create us for that. Yes, there are parts of our lives where we should intentionally isolate ourselves and to be silent. And this is so that we can learn to focus, and so that we don't get bored, so that our enjoyment in the things that Allah has made halal increases. You'll notice that individuals that are dependent on instantaneous gratification, it becomes very hard for them to enjoy the halal, and they will often need to go to the haram. But the individual that can cut themselves off from the world and sit in isolation and sit and reflect in silence, not only is their dependency on instantaneous gratification taken away, but they enjoy the halal even more. So yes, the halal may not always be as entertaining as the haram and as enjoyable as the haram. But that is a consequence of the training that you have given yourself, and not as a result of the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. So understand human weakness and our need for one another. Understanding human weakness and our need for one another. So just as an infant is born instinctively, knowing how to look for nourishment from its mother, it instinctively knows that in order to grow and flourish and reach its full potential, it must seek a place of security. It must reach a place of security. In Surah Ar-Rum, verse number 54, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us that Allah is the one who created you from weakness, and then ordained strength after weakness, and then ordained weakness and old age after strength. If you look at this, scholars generally talk about the similarities between an individual that is young and an individual that is old. Meaning that when you're young, you're very dependent, and as you get older, you're very dependent. And a lot of mufassirun have explained this based upon the literal interpretation of the ayah. One of these scholars, Al-Alusi, he goes on to explain that the two types of weaknesses that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking about in this ayah, one is emotional and one is physical. One is cognitive and one is physical. Right? So one is about your internal weakness and one is about your physical weakness. And both of them will take place in your life. And again, it can be when you're young, and it can happen again when you're old. That when you're young, you easily get scared. As you get older, you'll easily get scared again. Right? When you're young, you're not able to walk. As you get older, walking becomes a lot more difficult. So as children, we are born vulnerable, not only to physical threats, but also psychological, emotional, and cognitive weaknesses that require emotionally invested and present caregivers who, through their interaction with us, provide us a mental framework for how we understand ourselves, along with a framework for how we understand other people. So now, I want you to think about a child that is going close to a stove, meaning that there's fire over there. A child does not know that the fire is harmful to it. What are the ways that a child can learn that the fire is harmful? What are ways that the child can learn that the fire is harmful? What do you guys think? Yeah, go ahead. Experience, exactly. And that is what we naturally jump to. That the child touches the fire, it gets burnt. From experience, it has learned, and hopefully will not experience it again. What is another way a child can learn about the harms of the fire? Go ahead. Being warned by a parent, and I'll go even further, based upon the reaction of the parent, right? So as soon as the child is about to go to the fire, you start shouting the child's name, Ya Muhammad, step away from the fire. And the child panics. And they understand that they were about to do something that they shouldn't be doing. Now psychologically, it is not as effective as the child touching the fire. By touching the fire, more than likely they'll not repeat it again. But when you scare the child from the fire, they've learned something that, maybe I shouldn't be getting close to it. But their curiosity and their inquisitive nature may overcome that warning to get the experience. But this shows us that children will also learn based upon the reaction of the caregiver around them. So if the parent is paying attention and actually cares for the child, you should warn your child against the fire. Now if a parent does not respond to the fire and perhaps is not paying attention, they're on their phone the whole entire time, or you know what? This is an actual evil and mean parent. And it says, you know what? Let my child touch the fire. Now if you take this example of the fire and replace it with any other example, the ills of alcohol, the ills of promiscuous relationships, the ills of turning away from Islam, whatever it may be, why is it that we don't warn our children against all of these things like we warn them against the fire? Because those are psychological, emotional, spiritual fires that are just as important of warding our children away from than the physical fire. And what's amazing, subhanAllah, is that as you emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually warn your children of the spiritual, emotional, and psychological fires, that is how you actually save them from the physical fire. That is how you save them from the physical fire. So the presence of the parent, the knowledge of the parent, the concern of the parent is paramount. And I keep going back to the relationship of the parent and the child because it's the primary relationship that all of us have experienced. But you can take this same information and apply it to any other relationship. That if you knew your friend was about to walk into something very, very dangerous, perhaps they're on their phone and there's a ditch right in front of them, wouldn't you stop your friend from going into that ditch? Of course you would. But again, think about all of the other ditches that are out there that we don't warn our friends against. Right? So that is the mentality we want to have. There's a famous scholar of the past by the name of Al-Mawardi. And he says something profound that I want to share with you. He says, thereafter he made mankind more needy than any other animal. This is clear because so many animals can survive completely independent of the rest of their species. But the very nature of the human being is that he is in dire need of the rest of his species for survival. This aspect of him is inseparable from his very essence. This is the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَخُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا, and that mankind was created weak because of his dependency. So he goes on to give this example that human beings are more needy than a lot of other animals. Because how many other animals, you put them in their natural habitat and they naturally learn to survive and be independent from the rest of their species. Whereas human beings, not only do they need their parents or someone to protect them in their early ages, but this goes on into their toddler years, into their adolescent years, into their teenage years. Right? That parent relationship is so important even until that time. And this shows us that this element of dependency and weakness in human beings creates or manifests as human beings being weaker than animals from that perspective. But there's also an element of strength, meaning that only when you are most vulnerable with your weaknesses can you actually learn and grow. And only when the caretaker is in tune with the weaknesses and the need of the child can they truly serve the best interests of the child itself. And then not to talk about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places so much ajr in taking care of others, So why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala remind us of our weaknesses? So this is one of the distinctions between understanding weakness from an Islamic perspective versus understanding weakness from a purely scientific perspective. From an Islamic perspective, we know our weaknesses and we are taught our weaknesses to keep us humble in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that we may have humility in front of others, right? When it is deserving of. Whereas from a scientific perspective, when you look at weakness, it's all about focusing on the weakness to eradicate it and to get rid of it so that we can become stronger and more powerful and more conquering. So when you look at this concept of engineering the human body, I'm trying to remember, what was the... So Elon Musk currently owns Twitter. What was the guy's name who owned Twitter before Elon Musk? Anyone remember? Jack Dorsey, that's the guy. So I remember reading an article about Jack Dorsey on how he was trying to engineer his life. So how he would, fast for like days at a time. And he would always get his genomes tested as to how he could try to live up to 200 years and how he would, escape dementia in his old age and, basically use all the money that he has to live as long as he possibly could in a healthy fashion. Because if he did not make the most of this world, that was it. There's nothing left for him in the hereafter, or so he believed. Whereas from our perspective, our weaknesses define who we are and allow us to embrace them and allow us to show empathy to those that are weaker than us. Allow us to have humility towards those that are providing for us and taking care of us. And in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like we spoke about al-mutakabbir last week, in front of al-mutakabbir, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-mutakabbir because He is perfect. And we have no right to be mutakabbir because we are imperfect and we are weak. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-qawi and we are the du'afa, we are the weak. So we're meant to have humility in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now when we understand this, let's go to the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. كُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْئُولٌ. That all of you are shepherds and all of you are responsible for your flocks. Meaning, to someone else, you are a sheep, and someone else in your life, you are a shepherd to them. And this is the continuation of human life. That sometimes we are teachers, sometimes we are learners. And our responsibility is to embrace that. Don't try to get away from that. Embrace your weaknesses, learn to be vulnerable, and the teachers have the responsibility to not manipulate those weaknesses or to use the knowledge of those weaknesses against them for personal benefit, as often gets done. So now we're getting to the conclusion of what we want of today's session, inshallah, in the next 20 minutes or so, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So there was, actually, no, we didn't get to that yet. Okay, let's get to this quote over here. So, familial security in the early ages is of a dependent type and forms a basis from which the individual can work out gradually, forming new skills and interests in other fields. Where familial security is lacking, the individual is handicapped by the lack of what might be called a secure base from which to work. Let's summarize that. When an individual is brought up by a parent that is emotionally responsive, that is present physically and emotionally and cognitively, as the child grows up, it feels safe and secure to go and explore and try new things. But if the parent is not emotionally responsive and is not physically and emotionally present, the child will become very insecure and will become very, very dependent and will not want to learn and explore. And this will make this child fall behind with regards to experiences and skill sets. And he has this wonderful quote, subhanAllah. He says, "It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. So oftentimes the emotional and cognitive investment that is needed by children, by their parents, we think there will always be a later time. I don't need to worry about it because I can take care of it later. But if you understood that if you invest in your children heavily now, the damage that is done to them through life and through their relationships will be a lot easier to repair than to try to repair them later on in life. So protect them while they're young and protect them from that damage so that they don't need to be repaired later on in life. It's easier to do that when they are younger than when they grow older. So now, what are barriers that take place in connecting with people? What are barriers that take place in connecting with people? And I want to do another exercise with you. So, Surah Al-Anbiya, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, after أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اقترب للناس حسابهم وهم في غفلة معرضون ما يأتيهم من ذكر من ربهم محدث إلا استمعوه وهم يلعبون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, the time of people's judgment has drawn near, yet they are heedlessly turning away. Whatever new reminder comes to them from their Lord, they only listen jokingly. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that the reckoning has come closer to us, but out of heedlessness, we are turning away. Ghafla and i'rad. These are two things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions. When you look at relationships, there are these two key elements as to why relationships break down and also do not thrive. And that is, in the relationship, one party or both parties is heedless and or turns away. So heedless means they don't know. Turns away, they know, but they're intentionally not doing what they're supposed to. They're intentionally not doing what they're supposed to. Take the example of a marriage. Take the example of a marriage. Husband and wife are married, and the first time the husband sees the wife crying, he doesn't know what to do. He was raised in a household of no women. He didn't have any sisters, didn't have any cousins that he interacted with, never saw a woman really break down and cry. He doesn't know what to do. So he says, you know what? Let me just treat her the way I like to be treated when I'm upset. And he goes to his room, gives her space, let her think, let her contemplate. When she's ready to talk, she'll come to me. The wife thinks, what an evil husband I've married. Rather than coming to me and showing compassion and mercy and showing that he's there for me, he's isolated me and left me to myself. This is ghafla. Doesn't know any better. Lack of experience. Now, let's take a second example. Second example, husband comes home, sees wife is upset, and he says, you know what? I'm going to leave her alone. And this time he says, I'm going to leave her alone because I can't be bothered dealing with her emotions. I can't be bothered with it. This is an example of i'rad. This is an example of i'rad. Now when it comes down to our relationships, when they break down and they don't thrive, one parties or both parties are manifesting examples of ghafla and examples of i'rad. And examples of i'rad. Lack of knowledge, lack of awareness, and turning away. Turning away. And Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he goes on to explain in Madarij al-Salikin these very concepts. That there are some people that don't know better, and thus they act the way that they act. But there are other people, they know, but they choose not to. So particularly, just to go on the tangent that Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah goes on to explain, there are people that know the truth, but they don't want to accept the truth because they know how difficult its consequences are. So someone knows the truth about Islam, but they don't want to accept Islam because they know that they'll have to give up the alcohol. They know that they'll have to give up the drugs, the promiscuity, their abusive behavior. They know that they'll have to start praying 5 times a day. So it's easier to live in a state of rejection and heedlessness than to accept the truth for what it is. And this manifests itself in all of our relationships. So this means that even though early relationships mold our attachment expectations, and we tend to carry those expectations throughout life, they can always be altered for better or for worse. So now let's explain what this means. What was Adam alayhi salam created from? What was Adam alayhi salam created from? Who can tell me? From mud, from clay? That's what Adam alayhi salam was created from. Is mud and clay a hard substance or a soft substance? It's a soft substance. It's something that's malleable. It's something that you can shape, right?
Well, depends.
Clay depends. What does it depend on?
Well, sometimes it's hard. Like I touched clay before and it was tough.
Clay in its original form is meant to be soft and malleable and be able to shape it. It can become hard, that's very, very true. But in its essence, it's meant to be soft and shapeable. What is the wisdom behind Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling us that He was created out of clay? That as human beings, there are certain things that we exist with that are part of the clay, and we have them from the get-go, right? The fitrah. The child knows that it needs to get its milk from its mother. It should seek security from its mother. This intuition towards what is good and what is bad. All of that is a part of the clay. But what ends up happening is that clay can be molded and it can be shaped. So if you are a certain way, there's a good side and a bad side to this. You can be changed towards something good, but you can also be changed towards something bad and evil. You can also be changed towards something bad and evil. Now, after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created you in a perfect fashion, you're still created from emotional, psychological, and spiritual clay. So physically, you're no longer clay. But emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually, you're made out of clay when you come into this world. And eventually, you will be molded. Eventually, you will be molded. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ, he tells us, كُلُّ مَوْلُودٍ يُولَدُ عَلَى الْفِطْرَةِ, that every child is born upon the fitrah. And it is the parents that either make them a Christian or a Jew. Why does the Messenger ﷺ not say either makes them a Christian, a Jew, or a Muslim? Why is Islam not mentioned? Does anyone know the answer? Go ahead.
Because in the state that you're born in, you're already Muslim.
You're already Muslim? Okay, I'll explore that. How about from the sister side? There was someone that had their hand up. Fitrah is Islam. So then why didn't the Prophet ﷺ just say, كُلُّ مَوْلُودٍ يُولَدُ عَلَى الْإِسْلَامِ? Why did he not just say that every child is born upon Islam? So that's something to think about. Go ahead, what are you going to say? Yeah. Yeah.
Islam was like we were back then, so back then those are the main religions, and then they have to accept Islam as a active citizen.
But this is the Prophet ﷺ saying it, right? So Islam exists already at that time. So it wasn't that it was only those two religions that existed. But your friend right next to you had his hand up as well. Go ahead.
So like he said that fitrah is Islam, but although fitrah like includes Islam, it can also mean other things. So
Excellent. So are you saying you agree with her or you disagree with her?
so although fitrah it could be Islam, like Islam is part of fitrah, but fitrah also consists of more things than just Islam.
Such as?
Like we did this with Sheikh
Allahu Akbar.
yeah.
Bismillah.
And we told that naturally, like fitrah is what we naturally do as human beings.
Yes.
Like naturally you would think before making an action. So fitrah could consist of more than just simply.
Okay, I'm going to have a talk with Sheikh Ali Nasser about this. But good effort. Jazakallah khair. طيب. So now, I think let's clear the misconception. Islam and the fitrah are two distinct things. Islam and the fitrah are two distinct things. And every child is not born upon Islam, right? Every child is born upon the fitrah, knowing between right and wrong. And if that fitrah is allowed to flourish, then it will naturally lead into Islam. But if that fitrah is not allowed to flourish, or in fact, it becomes perverse, meaning it takes a different path than that natural path it is meant to take, it diverts into Christianity or Judaism or any other way of life, or any other way of life. So now, getting back to the point that I was going to make, subhanAllah, I completely forgot what I was going to say. Why was I asking about the كُلُّ مَوْلُودٍ يُولَدُ عَلَى الْفِطْرَةِ? That the Prophet ﷺ saying that every child is born upon the fitrah, and the parents either make it a Christian or a Jew. So the impact of the parents. Now this is where we want to speak about attachment. So I want to share this experiment with you. This is the experiment of children, and there's a set of toys inside of a room. Their mother is present, and there's an observer. And what ends up happening is that at the beginning of this observation, the mother and the child are together in the room along with the toy. And then eventually the mother goes away, and eventually the mother comes back. And the observances found that the children were broken down into three categories. Number one was when the child was there, as soon as they felt safe that the mother was there, they went and played with the toys. And then when the mother disappeared, they became sad. And when the mother came back, they became happy. This was the vast majority of children. Child group number two was, as soon as they got into the room, they separated from their mother, went straight to the toys. Didn't make eye contact with the mother. Mother left, didn't show any signs of sadness. Mother came back, didn't show any signs of happiness. And this is the second group. So the first group was the majority. Now you have a minority. And then you have a minority in a minority, which is the third group of people, which is that from the get-go, the child would not separate from the mother. No matter how many toys there were, it never went and played with the toys. The mother tried to get up and leave, the child would not let the mother go. And if the mother forced herself, the child stayed crying, and even after the mother came back, the child continued to cry. Right? So now, let's look at this, right? So what are the things that we learned? Group B were those infants who confidently explored their environment away from their mothers and then sought comfort from them after being reunited with them. They sought comfort in their mothers when distressed. Before this assessment, these mothers had been documented as more sensitive to their children and more responsive to them during the home observations. So the behavior of the child is predicated by the mother's sensitivity and her responsiveness to home observations, right? Then we have the group where the infants who pulled away from their mothers, they even avoided direct eye contact. They would distract themselves with the toys, and upon reunion with their mothers, they would ignore the mother's attempt to reconnect. During the home observation, the mothers of these children had been rated as more rejecting and less accepting of their infants' attachment attempts. SubhanAllah. Look, that the child is trying to connect with the mother and the mother rejects the child. So what does the child learn? That you know what? Rejection is the norm in relationships. I should reject any form of connection because that is what my mother has shown me. So let me just be distracted by my environment. Now what did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say in Surah Al-Anbiya? وَهُمْ يَلْعَبُونَ. That they're just spending their lives in ghafla and i'rad, but that's not enough. They're just playing away, being distracted the whole entire time. And then the last group were the infants who were not comfortable exploring the toys and tended to cling to their mothers throughout the assessment. During the home observations, these mothers were documented as being unresponsive and inconsistently available to their infants. So sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not there, sometimes they're responding, sometimes they're not responding. Now, just from the observation of the mother and the interaction with the child, look at what it does to the child itself. When the mother is responsive and sensitive, the child learns to explore and learns to grow. When the mother is absent and rejective, the child does the exact same thing. But when the mother is part-time there and part-time not there, part-time responsive and part-time irresponsive, it'll just naturally, constantly cling to the mother. So we learn the importance of the parent, particularly the mother, and the impact that the mother's response has on the psychological development of the child. And these are called, different types of attachments. So you have secure, which is the first, avoidant, and then ambivalent. And those are the three attachment styles. Now we get to, let's share this and then I'll move on to the last section. These children have learned not to respond and keep all of their cries for connection inside out of fear that they might irritate their caregiver and lead to complete abandonment. So group number 2 that was rejected, like they did further studies on these children, and when the mother is away, their heartbeat actually goes up. And they have like a sense of nervousness, but they don't display it, and they don't cry either. And further, they researched this, it's so that the child doesn't want to cry out of fear that if I annoy my parent, it'll disappear even further and reject me even more. The mothers of children in the ambivalent group, part-time there, part-time not there, were inconsistent in their responsiveness, so the children learned to cling out of fear of losing their mother's attention. Later in life, these people tend to possess a negative self-image, a fear of rejection, and an excessive need for approval. An excessive need for approval. Now we move on to the last portion for today, which is people shape how we connect to Allah. People shape how we connect to Allah. So the Prophet ﷺ, he tells us that you are upon the religion of your close friend. So be very careful as to how you choose your close friends. Be very careful as to how you choose your close friends. So this shows us that we are impacted by the environment we are around. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also introduces himself as Rabbul Alameen, right? Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Rabbul Alameen is the creator, the sustainer, the provider of everything that exists. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being the Rabb means that these are the functions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides for us. He provides, He creates, He provides, and He sustains. Now, it's interesting that when you look at this concept of Rabb, it's often mentioned as a noun, right? As a title, right? This is who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. But when is it used as a verb? When is it used as something transitive? It's used as a transitive when talking about parents. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us in Surah Al-Isra, وَاخْفِضْ لَهُمْ جَنَاحَ الذُّلِّ مِنَ الرَّحْمَةِ وَقُرْ رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. That, oh Allah, that in Surah Al-Isra, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches this dua to firstly lower the wing of compassion and mercy towards our parents, and then to make dua that, oh Allah, have mercy upon them just like they raised me when I was small. So there's a very strong connection between how the deen is perceived versus, or in collaboration with, how the child's relationship is with their parents. How the child's relationship is with the parents. And I'll read out some of the things over here. First, caregivers of a child imprint upon the mind of the child expectations regarding connection with other people. So the relationship with the parents you are setting the standard as to how all other relationships will be impacted. So children that are secure with their parents will be secure in other relationships. Children that are not secure in their relationship with their parents will be insecure. And then some people will be completely rejective of other relationships, and other people will be extra dependent, extra needy, have lack of self-esteem, and will have negative self-images. And this applies to everyone. Secure parents raise secure children, and those children will raise secure children. Meaning, this concept of attachment is transgenerational. So when you actively pay attention to your parenting style, this will not only impact your children, but also the way they parent as well. And that is why you'll see that if you look at greater society as a whole, children are becoming more degenerative over time as a result of the degenerative parent styles or lack of knowledge of parenting styles from their parents. And this is what happens over time. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ, he says that a time doesn't come except that the time after it is worse. And you can interpret one of these meanings to be because parents just don't care about raising their children anymore. Now we get to the last paragraph. The ultimate objective of Islam is to connect people with their Creator. Islam is about forming a bond with Allah. If our early childhood interactions with our parents provide models for how we will connect with creation, what does that mean regarding connecting to Allah? So if you can understand everything that we've just learned in this last section with regards to other relationships, can this also be applied to a child's relationship with Allah? Without a shadow of a doubt. If a person has learned not to trust their early attachment figures, how will that affect their ability to trust Allah? If avoidant behaviors are the byproduct of emotionally unavailable parents, then do those parents ultimately share some responsibility for their child avoiding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is there a share in that responsibility? Without a shadow of a doubt. At the end of the day, Islam is a choice where the child has to recognize the truth and embrace the truth and accept the truth. Yes, this is the child's decision. But does their upbringing affect their decision-making process? Without a shadow of a doubt. So there is a shared responsibility. We start next week's session on parenting advice on how to be keys of goodness. Mafatih al-khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us for our sins, mistakes, and shortcomings with regards to our relationships, particularly with regards to parents towards their children and children towards their parents. Allahumma ameen. I know that was a very heavy session, a lot to take in, but if you focus and you study and you learn and you try to implement, the rest of the book gets easier. If you don't try to take notes and you don't try to focus, then the book actually becomes more difficult because the foundation is very, very loose. So now the whole book is about listening and hearing, and you're trying to wonder, where is all of this going? But what we want to understand is that listening and hearing are not just about words that are spoken, it's also about what is unspoken. It is about what people feel and what people believe. And we will only be able to get to the root of that if we continue this journey together. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us tawfiq. I'll take 3 questions, and then I just want to share something with you at the end, inshallah. So let's start off with questions. Bismillah. Ahsanti, yes.
And at the end, I'm sure, like, the people around him, they didn't care much, for security and all that, and compassion and emotion and stuff, support and those. But he turned out to be a prophet and the best of human beings. So I would say what he says, it applies to every child, but I could be wrong.
Excellent. So that's an observation. And the sister's observation is that if you look at the Prophet ﷺ, he was raised without parents. He was, the best of human beings. He was perfect in his character, right? How do we reconcile that with everything that we've mentioned? So a couple of points to keep in mind. Number 1, we highlighted the fact that human beings are malleable, right? They can be taught to be good, they can be taught to be bad. And their circumstances will not always dictate the outcomes, because they can learn new behaviors and go through therapy and counseling and implement Islam at its root level and change who they are. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Number two is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically mentions about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, وَوَجَدَكَ ضَالًا فَهَدَى وَوَجَدَكَ عَائِلًا فَأَغْنَى, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala found you uninformed and guided you, and found you, dependent, and became the source of your independence, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took special care of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I believe that very point, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam should not be used as the rule, he should be used as the exception. Yes, that there are certain people, subhanallah, you will put them in the most terrible of circumstances and situations, yet somehow, some way, they still end up growing to be amazing, phenomenal individuals. That is the exception, that is not the rule. The rule is that parenting styles are very, very important. And if parents are not responsive and are not emotionally, physically, spiritually present for their children, then the attachment styles, there's too much research to prove that this is how children turn out over periods of time. Allahu ta'ala. Very good point though. Jazakallah khair. Any other questions? Yes, Bismillah, go ahead. No, excellent. That's very, very good. Jazakallah khair. So the sister's point is that if you look at the example of Luqman, and this turns into a very good discussion, according to the vast majority of ulama, Luqman was not a prophet. He was a wise man that was righteous. Yet he's mentioned in the Quran, specifically as a whole surah named after him, and the crux of that surah is the advice that he's giving his child, right? So the emotional, physical, spiritual, available father figure that's there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loved it so much that He created an example out of it so that we learn from it and implement it in our lives. And this is a very important point that indirectly that she's mentioning. A lot of the examples that we've been mentioning have been about mothers. But the fatherly figure is just as important. The fatherly figure is just as important. In fact, if you study Freudian psychoanalysis, the whole concept of daddy issues is about the absence of fathers, whether physically, emotionally, spiritually, or cognitively, right? So the presence of fathers should not be understated. Just the research that we're using is mother-focused, and a lot of the texts Islamically focus on the mother as well. How should I respect the mother 3 times? Paradise being under the feet of the mother, and so on and so forth. Wallahu ta'ala alam.